We've got a lot of people joining today, so we'll just give it a couple of minutes just to allow everyone to get in. Welcome and good afternoon, everybody. We are delighted to be having such a great session this afternoon, and thank you so much to Louise Dickens and Anna Morris today, two incredibly dedicated professional operators who are rightly incredibly concerned about their livelihoods at the moment. We've got over 200 people registered for this session, which again illustrates the level of concern being felt by our sector today. This session is going to be recorded and we'll have a Q&A at the end, so do add any questions into the chat area. We're also in the process of collating a frequently asked questions document to help operators, property owners and managers navigate through the challenges that this legislation and guidance is going to present in terms of the practicalities of operating a short-term let business. This is what we did during the pandemic when the Scottish Government issued guidance on restrictions. You'll have seen them, that people found difficult to navigate. And I hope that our FAQ document is going to be really, really helpful when the licensing is implemented and indeed the planning control areas. So do please contribute any questions on the link that Mel's going to share. And once the FAQ document has been collated, we'll obviously publish on the ASSC website and update. So it'll be a live document. So I don't need to tell you that the tourism is a mainstay of the Scottish economy and that self-catering is hugely important to Scottish tourism in terms of jobs, revenue and world-class experiences offered to guests. Scotland's self-caterers play a key role in ensuring that Scotland maintains its position as a world-leading destination for tourists. And this excessive pieces of legislation threaten this sector with extinction. Edinburgh are leading the way with planning control areas and licensing implementation, but it has national relevance. All the other local authorities will be looking to Edinburgh to see how they implement it. So even if you're not in Edinburgh, there is still a huge risk to your business. The ASSC agrees that with the statement in the National Planning Framework consultation that tourism can bring a wealth of economic, social and cultural benefits to our communities, cities and regions, supporting resilience and stimulating job creation. But we believe that the sector needs to be supported in its recovery from the impact of COVID-19 and that an appropriate balance in the regulatory framework is absolutely essential. We also endorsed the First Minister's comment in Scotland's Outlook 2030 that an innovative, resilient and welcoming tourism industry is vital, not only for Scotland's future prosperity, but for Scotland's place in the world. Scotland's self-catering sector, everybody on this call wants to play our full part in achieving this objective. To be such an essential part of Scotland's tourism mix is even more remarkable for our sector when most self-caterers operate small or micro businesses. Our professional self-caterers are diligent and considerate business owners who are too often unfairly maligned. They don't hollow out communities, as some people have claimed, but rather a part of the local communities across Scotland and have been for many, many years and decades. For Scotland to remain competitive as a leading tourism destination, it needs to be responsive and adaptive to consumer trends, both in respect to the range of accommodation available, as well for more environmentally conscious options. As the Scottish Tourism Alliance told the Scottish Government in September 2021, when articulated concerns from the tourist industry about short-term let licensing, in these COVID times, there has over these past months been a sizable upturn in demand for self-catering accommodation. And insights would suggest that this trend is unlikely to change in the years ahead. In 2021, we've seen a significant increase in domestic tourism since reopening in the summer. Many guests have chosen to travel domestically for the first time, and self-catering has been the accommodation of choice. Now, we expect international travel to start recovering strongly in 22, but we're absolutely confident that we're going to see continued strong demand for Scottish self-catering. Self-catering units can help disperse guests around Scotland. They're in areas where not often there aren't very many hotel chains. Thereby, they're spreading the economic benefits even wider. As academic studies have shown, there are clear economic benefits for areas containing short-term lets, and the type of tourist staying in such accommodation has a huge annual spend relative to other tourists, and much of this expenditure seems to be concentrated in the local area. Self-catering businesses should be viewed as a solution to sustainability, not the problem. Short-term rentals provide for groups such as families and festival performers in a way that hotels simply can't do and don't do. The ASSC was incredibly proud to be part of the strategy steering group to develop Scotland's national strategy, Scotland Outlook 2030. This commits to ensuring the value of tourism to Scotland's economy continues to increase and delivers shared prosperity for all by encouraging the right growth in the right areas. As a condition for success, it identifies policy as being one of the 6 key areas. I quote, "The potential contribution that tourism can deliver must be understood and acknowledged with the right policy and regulatory landscape in place to support our vision of 21st century tourism." The right regulatory landscape is essential for self-catering to continue to provide the economic and environmental benefits promised by Scotland Outlook 2030. Self-catering provides £867 million per annum to the Scottish economy, benefiting local communities the length and breadth of the country, supporting 24,000 full-time jobs. Edinburgh's economy alone benefits by £70 million from our sector alone. The self-catering sector supports Scotland's national performance framework in many ways. Short-term lets are one of the more sustainable holiday sectors, with businesses supporting communities through local visitor spend and through businesses sourcing local tradesmen and suppliers. Our sector demonstrates fair work and businesses encouraging innovation and development. We alleviate poverty, offering excellent value for families going on holiday, which is incredibly important for health and mental health in particular. Rather than hollowing out communities, we support them and retain the visitor pound in the local economy, demonstrating community sustainability. All that said, on the 19th of January, MSPs voted 68-53 to support short-term let licensing, and they voted in favour of the planning control areas regulations by 87-33. On the 23rd of February, Edinburgh Council approved a proposal to designate the entire council area as a short-term let control area. The goal for control areas is to manage high concentrations of secondary letting, restrict or prevent short-term lets in places or types of building where it's not seen to be appropriate, and help local authorities ensure that homes are best used to house residents. Edinburgh Council is the first council in Scotland to approve the proposal for their area, which will require every single short-term let that's offering secondary letting to apply for planning permission. This undeniably sets a precedent for other councils across Scotland to follow suit. Other areas of the UK are also going to be watching too. Make no mistake, this is going to devastate the self-catering industry in Edinburgh. Cleaners, concierge teams, marketing agencies, and tourism that is dependent on our sector will all be impacted. By voting to include this entire city area into the incredibly anti-business and restrictive scheme, the City of Edinburgh Council has shown that it doesn't care for the many small businesses who work hard to ensure that the capital continues to have a world-leading tourism offering. Councillors are more than aware that the real problem is a chronic lack of house building, but it's much more expedient to scapegoat short-term rental professionals than do anything real to combat that. The Empty Homes Partnership has announced that there are 43,000 long-term empty properties in Scotland, along with 28,000 which have been empty for at least a year. Some 7,500 of those are in Edinburgh. They say that bringing empty homes back into use will be a key part of solving Scotland's housing shortage. Everyone that works in the short-term let industry, everyone on this call supports health and safety for all guests. Of course we do. Commercial operators have worked within pre-existing legislative frameworks for decades. We have coexisted harmoniously with residential dwellings for decades. We're responsible hosts that welcome guests, whether they're tourists, business guests, blue chip companies moving staff to Edinburgh, film companies housing staff during filming in the city, etc., etc. We've got specific legislation in place concerning fire and other safety regulations. You know that. We also have specific legislation in place for antisocial behaviour. You wonder why then the council doesn't appear to use its antisocial behaviour powers to tackle these noisy troublemakers. Why would introducing a planning control area in Edinburgh be the only or appropriate solution when it's also going to close legitimate small businesses that have been operating for less than 10 years, but have never caused a single issue for their neighbour? And yet we are still blamed for destroying neighbourhood cohesion and for being the root cause of neighbour nuisance. Collectively, we have spent the last 5 years arguing in numerous consultation responses and in hundreds of meetings with ministers and MSPs that these two policies are going to entail a materially negative impact for Scotland's tourism sector as a whole. It will cost jobs and livelihoods and will reduce the number of short-term lets available without increasing housing provision. As an organisation, the Association of Scotland Self-Caterers represents 153 professional self-catering businesses in Edinburgh alone and 1,400 throughout Scotland. We are incredibly concerned and disappointed that the City of Edinburgh Council appear to have disregarded many of the legitimate points and sources of contrary evidence that we provided and have proceeded regardless with a proposal which is widely believed to be fundamentally flawed. Now, our real concern is that that's going to be replicated throughout Scotland, and other councils are following close behind. We're now waiting on the Scottish ministers, the ministers of the Scottish Government, to agree or reject City of Edinburgh Council's proposals. We've not had any kind of comfort that they're not going to agree to it. In the meantime, we're going to carry on working with key stakeholders, local authorities and the Scottish Government to try and mitigate the impact of licensing, encouraging clarity, consistency and a risk-based approach, keeping fees to a minimum. We will do absolutely everything that we can to protect every single one of your businesses. How we live and work can represent the beginning of a bold new approach, putting our communities, our people, our visitors and our people and our businesses and our environment at the heart of everything we do, and ever more so in a post-pandemic environment. But we can only do that if the regulatory landscape enables that approach. We will continue to stand alongside our self-catering professional and our colleagues across tourism to ensure that a fair deal for all and an end to the unfair misrepresentation that our sector has endured. I'm absolutely delighted to be welcoming Louise Dickens and Anna Morris today, who are absolutely facing the perfect storm. They're both Edinburgh operators, but it's really important to recognise that this is not going to be isolated to Edinburgh. But I thought it would be really valuable to hear their story and how this is going to impact them in real terms. So, starting with you, Anna, what is the real impact of these regulations?
Thanks, Fiona. Thanks for having me here today. Yeah, so well, I'm going to talk a little bit about my business, our guests, and how I feel the impact will be on it. None of it's proportional, really. So the Edinburgh Dress is an award-winning local business, and this year is our 15-year anniversary. However, this milestone is bittersweet because of being caught up in this political maelstrom. So when we set out 15 years ago, I was inspired by working at Royal Yacht Britannia, and my business partner Anne-Marie and I wanted to provide a high level of service and to get some pretty special homes in our book. Indeed, we were one of the first providers in the city to offer Visit Scotland 5-star self-catering apartments. And we've always insisted on compliance with safety certs from the very start, and if our owners didn't have them, they couldn't list with us. We are a reputable business, and I believe that Edinburgh Council should be proud of us and others like us, and that includes good independent operators throughout Scotland. We want to create a local business. We wanted to provide a personal service, and 60% of our bookings are direct, which in a global market is no mean feat, and we have a really high level of repeat customer. We employ 4 people and work directly with 4 management companies, each who use cleaning companies. That's 9 local Scottish businesses linked to the Edinburgh Dress, all who stand to lose their livelihoods. And that's before I even mention the tradespeople and other in cafes and restaurants. We also use a Scottish tech company, Bookster, to power our booking system, and they will also be badly affected as many of their clients are Edinburgh based. Their system allows us to date bookings for other local companies and vice versa. We've always tried to work with local companies. In terms of my career, I was lucky to do the Destination Leadership Programme and have benefited from HIT leadership training. Indeed, my staff recently have all taken part in training and also the climate change training, and have said it was incredibly valuable. During COVID, we benefited from government-backed support, like many of us, and the furlough scheme, and we have a young Kickstarter with us now. It's beyond my comprehension to feel like we are getting through COVID, all of us here, to be potentially snuffed out now. I do believe that there's an opportunity for us to guide policy, even at this late stage. The devil is really in the details now. I started the business with a family flat that I stayed in as a student, and the neighbours were delighted when we started it as a holiday home, painted the communal hallway and deep cleaned the stair. Many of our properties are in communal stairs. In 15 years, not one of them has ever had a complaint, and we only get praise for maintaining the communal areas. In fact, we even have a next door neighbour staying in one of our Newtown apartments while hers is being renovated. And this makes me question where Edinburgh residents may stay if they need family accommodation, if there is an insurance claim or they're refurbing their property. They need to be in their local neighbourhood near schools and work. We have a strong relationship with owners and know that most of our properties would not be returned to the housing market as affordable housing. It would be a tragic loss if a blanket rejection to continue as self-catering properties was imposed on these properties just because they're in a communal stair. Over the years, we've had 40,000 guests staying across our small portfolio, and I don't believe that what we do can be replaced by hotels or apart hotels, as we offer something irreplaceable, and our guests certainly think so. In the year of Visit Scotland storytelling, here are the stories of some of our guests. The Baroness from London, who stayed at our Castle Terrace apartment for the past 11 years with her two friends. She attends every show at the Next Door Theatre during the festival from morning until night and calls the flat her Edinburgh home and loves our female-run boutique business. The Irish family, who adored coming to our George Square house year on year and held a celebration of life mass in the house after their son died. The time they spent there as a family had meant so much to them. The American television and film producer, writer and director who stayed in Charlotte Square while writing his show for CBS. He loved living like a local, the interaction with us and everything that the apartment had to offer. Indeed, on moving to one of Edinburgh's top hotels, because we had another booking, he actually phoned us to beg if he could come back as he had writer's block. And the BBC, who filmed many dramas in several of our properties, choosing the property and not the location. As Fiona said earlier, it's often painted in the press that self-catering is bad for communities. Whilst of course there are bad operators, there are many, many more good. I think that we are part of the community. I am part of the community. My team, my staff are part of the community. We employ locals and our guests eat and drink in local eateries and purchase their food in local shops. I believe it will be bad for the city to eliminate this type of tourism which keeps communities thriving. Indeed, in the tourism strategy for 2030, one of its key priorities is to keep offering a diverse range of accommodation to visitors. This is also in line with a national ambition to reduce carbon emissions and to promote responsible tourism. Self-catering accommodation like ours provides the consumer with an eco-friendly stay where they can stay longer and live like a local. Slow tourism. Our current website development work, funded by a digital boost grant, is to promote green tourism. This will help to protect local communities. Following our climate emergency training, we have pledged to help to convert as many properties as we can to achieve the Green Tourism Award, and we're actively working with them just now. I firmly believe that self-catering in Edinburgh is a vital part of the Edinburgh community, and I hope that we can continue to offer our unique accommodation and service. I hope I've outlined just a little bit what self-catering means not only to my business, but what our industry means to the people who visit and indeed stay in our city. And Louise will now talk a little bit more about some solutions that we very much hope may influence how this all plays out. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Fiona, thank you for inviting me today. My name's Louise Dickens, and I have been running my company Dickens. It's a similar sort of business to Anna's The Edinburgh Dress for 24 years now. Wondering whether I will get to my 25th anniversary. One of the things that feels really depressing about the situation that we find ourselves in now is how our industry has been demonized, is demonized in the press, how negative the conversation around short-term lets is and has become in the press, etc. When I think there, as Anna just said in her talk, there are so many more businesses and individuals who are actively involved in short-term letting, who that's their business, who are running businesses that Edinburgh should be, well, and I'm talking about Edinburgh now, and I know that what I'm saying is true for businesses across Scotland, but this is sort of Edinburgh-based conversation today, but especially in Edinburgh, where I think one of the reasons that everybody in the country is facing the licensing and potential planning changes that we are is because of Edinburgh and the noise within stairwells. And it is, yeah, as I said, it's depressing to think that the conversation has been so negative when there are so many things to feel proud about the professional, caring, trustworthy businesses and individuals who are running self-catering businesses in Edinburgh and around Scotland. I think one of the other things about Edinburgh in particular, and I don't know how true this will be for the rest of Scotland, but within Edinburgh, my business, I would say that 75% of my business is connected to the economy of Edinburgh. It's not just about tourists. We look after tourists, we look after visitors, but even many visitors, they're coming here because they have family in the city. It's not just a sort of pure tourist visit to Edinburgh, but also my business is might be semi-unusual in some ways, but we do a lot of what we would call midterm rentals. We used to call them short-term lets until that phrase became linked with so much negativity. So we call them midterm rentals now, but they're bookings that are for more than a month. And we let to, I've got 17 flats out to a film company. There's a new film studio in Edinburgh, and they're here for several months at a time. And this film studio is a big deal for Edinburgh. There is ever flowing money coming from Amazon and Netflix to create more programs, and they're here creating whole series here for several months at a time. And there's just no way that those people would be able to stay in hotels. You know, they're here for several months and they want a home environment. We look after relocation companies, people relocating to the city. Quite often, if you're relocating to Edinburgh and you are wanting to look for a long-term flat and say you're coming from abroad, there's absolutely, if you start sending off your emails to all the long-term letting agents, and sorry, I don't want to cause any offence if there are any long-term letting agents on this call, but people don't come back to them. No one responds. And so you need to be in the city to be able to secure a home. So we rent to a lot of people like that. Frequently, they can't find anything in the long-term market. So we're providing flexibility for that long-term market, because people are, as long as the homes they're staying in are available to extend in, people are able to extend with us. We look after a lot of local families if they're having an insurance job done in their own home. I've got several of those in homes at the moment, and people that are having refurbishment works done. We look after families, you know, grannies that might have family coming to visit who need somewhere to stay locally. And these people just aren't going to stay in hotels. And the idea that I think the other thing is that we all know, you know, Edinburgh is an unbelievably beautiful city with unbelievably beautiful housing stock. And of course, people want to be able to stay in homes here. And it's vital that there continues to be a diverse offering, a choice for people to want to come and stay here. Now, Edinburgh Council's plans currently are that you would be able to let for 28 days a year if you don't have a license. And what you can see happening there is that people will tend to let only during the festival. I started my business letting for the festival all those 24 years ago. And lots of people who are here working in the festival, if they're coming because they've got a show on, they're always here for a bit more than 28 days. They're here for like 31 days, a bit longer. I provide homes for the international festival. They're all here for like several weeks, 6 weeks, 5 weeks, this sort of time. And if people are only allowed to let for 28 days a year, then what you can be sure of is that people will try to generate the most money they possibly can in that period. And if the supply is smaller and the demand is still strong, then the prices will go up to an extent where it's going to have a real significant impact on the festival. One thing that Adam McVeigh, the leader of the council here, had said or claimed is that he didn't want to harm the festival, that he loved it. But I think the absolute opposite will happen, because the first thing that impacted the festival in Edinburgh was the introduction of the PRT, the private residential tenancy, which came in 2017, and it previously lots of student flats have been available in the summer, and it used to sort of fit neatly. But now the year has changed because the PRT and students leases don't have end dates anymore. And so rather than them changing in July, they're now changing in May. And that has already had an impact on the supply that's available in the festival. So these things all sort of combining are going to have a really significant impact. I don't know if there's a sort of sense of arrogance at the council, that they don't believe that these things are going to have an impact on the economy of the city. I don't know if, to be honest with you, I don't know if they care, but which seems quite extraordinary. But they are. I mean, I can feel with the conversations that we're having this year with people. Obviously, the festival hasn't happened for the last 2 years. With people that are on the phone to us, you can feel that there is a lack of supply already, and it's starting to freak people out, to cause real concern about. And the idea that Edinburgh would create a situation that would potentially harm our festivals it's just absolutely extraordinary. Anyway, as Anna said earlier, we are determined. I mean, so my business, 24 years, we 100% of our businesses, of our bookings are direct. We don't happen to advertise on any channels. We don't use, I suppose I'm the sort of goody two shoes of letting in Edinburgh, but we don't use lot boxes, we don't advertise sofa beds. Quite often we're looking after, a bit like Anna, I'm sure that you do this too, we're looking after a lot of second homes, and they are a genuine second home. They are, somebody wants their home to be taken care of. Now, the other good thing about the second home owner who wants to open up their home rather than have it closed for the time that they aren't there is that it is available for people to stay in. If these people aren't able to use the home in the rest of the year, then they will remain closed. And I just fail to see how that can be a better situation for the city. Anyway, trying to sort of keep positive. I mean, one of the things I said is, it is extraordinary coming out of COVID. That was really tough for our sector. To think that now, and actually we're full. My business, we're full. We've been full since September. And that should feel fantastic. And as Anna said earlier, that's a sort of bittersweet situation, but it should feel fantastic, but it doesn't feel fantastic, because I would say that 20% of my time is spent fighting my own government and my own council for my really excellent, professional, quality and caring business to survive. And it's mad. And that's not obviously taking into account 20% of my working day. but plenty of time in the middle of the night when I lie awake, sort of panicking about what the future holds for us. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. Anyway, we have tried to keep the conversation positive, and as Anna said earlier, looking for ways to influence and to get our point of view across. It feels like the point of view of sort of sane and rational business owners like us has been drowned out by the noise, this negative noise, but we need to make sure that the powers that be are hearing us. So I put together 6 dynamic yet simple solutions for short-term letting in Edinburgh. Now I don't know, Fiona, if we can share this later rather than me droning on about all the points, but there were 6 main points. The first one is noise monitoring. There is a system, there's several out there, but there's one that we, ASSC, recently did a presentation for called Room Monitor, who they started about 7 years ago in Barcelona as a direct result of Barcelona facing what Edinburgh is facing now, which is lots of complaints from neighbours that these short-term lets were having an impact on their world. And we all know, everybody can imagine that if you were I live in a flat, and if my neighbours downstairs were causing me real issues in this way, I would be feeling annoyed about it. There's no doubt about that. Anyway, this noise monitoring, it's in 99, so it's in Barcelona, Paris and Madrid, and in those cities it has changed the narrative away from being negative to a situation where actually the importance of short-term letting to the local economy is now the recognized thing, and let's pray that can happen here. And I suppose that's a positive story for us all to cling on to, that's they turned it around in Barcelona. Let's hope we can turn it around here. This noise monitoring system, 99% of noise complaints are dealt with within 30 minutes, which is quite extraordinary, isn't it? And what it's doing is it's trying to pick up the noise complaints before neighbours have an opportunity to complain. So the person that's got their telly on too loud, the person that's having a supper and loud talking, and they don't realise how loud they've been. And we and what it does is, if there's sort of sustained noise, there's a central office who will get in touch with the tenants, with the guests directly, to say, we've got sustained noise from you, please can you turn the noise down. And that, because quite often people don't realise they're creating the noise. And the other brilliant thing about the noise monitoring system is that they also have a seal called We Respect, which is about doing precisely what self-catering businesses, Anna's and mine, and all of the other small and other agencies in Edinburgh that are doing a good job, respecting neighbourhoods, respecting communal areas, respecting the importance placed on sustainability, as Anna said earlier. All businesses are concerned about being sustainable and green, so that's something else that they're thinking about, plus having this noise monitoring, 24-hour noise monitoring thing, and so that's the number one. I think that grandfather rights are being offered to homes where people have been operating for 10 years, but they haven't been extended to agents that have been operating for over 10 years. And that's something that we definitely want to fight for, because, if you have a number of homes in the hands of, safe pair of hands of an agent, they are going to do nothing to jeopardize their license. So the idea that agents would be ignored in that way would be a crazy situation. That's something we're definitely wanting to stay. My experience is that, well, my experience in this sense is slightly anecdotal, because I'm not a business that has problems. I don't have complaints from neighbours, etc., etc. But I think that the shorter the stay, the more problems there tends to be. And so in Edinburgh, you could very easily, because the real problem here is within communal stairwells, but there could easily be a minimum stay period that was used by the council to deter, and I would put that at 3 days. But it could be, 4, 3, 4, 5 if there were problems. That's something that could be extended to try to reduce problems, because I think there are more problems when people are staying for a very short period. Maximum occupancy. I mean, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to work out if you've got a 2-bedroom flat with 15 beds, that is a major problem, because there's just no way that the space can accommodate those people. So homes should have the appropriate number of people staying in them, and clearly that should be part of the approval to be able to let any home. An alternative to lockboxes, there are lockboxes. Obviously, we all have seen the pictures and the photographs of Petrillian's lockboxes. And as a business, we've chosen not to use them because they're such a contentious point. And actually, the reality is that we've got a central office, we do a meet and greet sometimes, but people come and collect keys from our office, and it really doesn't seem to cause very many problems. But there are alternatives to lockboxes. And you could ban them on communal stairs. There are electronic keypads, which obviously make a difference. But also there are some areas in town, key safes within hotels, etc., which could be used as an alternative. And then finally, in my 6 points, the ASSC put together a really excellent code of conduct, which slightly amusingly, Edinburgh Council were influential. They were part of the decision-making process, weren't they, Fiona, in putting that thing together, but have chosen not to get behind it, not to publish it. And I think if everybody doing this business in Edinburgh needed to actually abide by those codes of conduct, which, I mean, again, the problem isn't with people, probably most of the people on this call, it's not with us, but if you had to, then the rogue operators that have caused so many problems for so many people it would be an easy way of making sure that they're behaving appropriately. So that is the end of my 6 solutions. And I don't know, Fiona, if I've spoken enough now. Want to
You're a star. I mean, I think what's really important is to get this perspective. And this is somebody's put in the chat, they wish that you guys had been with me on the panel. Well, I wish you'd been on the panel that discussed this as well, but that wasn't an option. The fact is, the Scottish government doesn't seem to be willing to understand the human impact of these pieces of legislation. This is people's lives and livelihoods, and 2 of those lives and livelihoods are on screen with me today. In fact, me too. I've been a self-caterer for 20 years, and one of my properties quite possibly will not be granted a license because we have vexatious neighbours. So I'm living and breathing this as much as you are. And the concerns are really, really huge. Somebody's put in the chat, what about, if you've not got a neighbour for 200 meters, but they're still vexatious and complain a lot? The problem is that you have to alert your nearest neighbours within, we did get it down from 20 meters to 4 meters, unless they've snuck that back in. But you do have to alert your nearest neighbour, even if that's 1.5 miles down the drive. So it's opening up to vexatious neighbours. And what our concern is at what point does your license get refused on those grounds? Does your license get refused because one neighbour in the tenement says that they don't want it to happen? Or what do they have to evidence that it's a significant problem? What are the grounds of objection? And these are things that nobody can respond to us. So we are working really hard with local authorities to try and iron out some of these issues, and it's going to take an awfully long time to get there, I think, unfortunately. But we'll carry on doing absolutely everything that we can to mitigate against all the unintended consequences. There's been quite a lot of chat about planning permission versus change of use. So change of use rather than certificate of lawfulness. If you've been operating if you've been using a property for a certain use for over 10 years, they cannot take any enforcement action, but you will have to apply for a certificate of lawfulness to evidence that you've been doing that. Now, the difficulty is that proving the on balance of probability, because it's civil law, that it's been used continuously as a short-term let for over 10 years is going to be very, very difficult. Somebody in the chat spent 3 days putting together the evidence. You're going to have to prove your redacted accounts. You're going to have to prove all sorts of things, and it's going to be really, really quite difficult. Now, there may be a point, and this is where each individual property will look differently, and you might need to take advice. Different circumstances are going to demand different options. So, for example, if you've got a very small property which has got very little storage, which fundamentally isn't going to be fit for proper human habitation, but is fit for holiday letting, you might be better going for change of use planning permission rather than a certificate of lawfulness. But all of those are going to have to be taken on a case-by-case basis. And we're hoping to work with a planning consultancy that we will endorse and promote that can help you navigate through those issues. And we're also working with Brodie's, incredibly well-respected planning firm in Glasgow, and talking about all of these issues. The other issue is that the licensing order requires licensing authorities to use planning judgment to make a decision as to whether to grant or refuse a license, which is fundamentally ultra vires, or beyond the powers of the legislation in layman's terms. So what they're doing is they've actually left it wide open for some kind of legal challenge via a judicial review. Now, we don't want to do that, but it's completely possible. And so we will continue to look at all of those options going forwards. And we're watching the local authorities with an absolute keen eagle eye to check how they're planning on implementing this. Now, in Orkney, I understand that somebody has been told, so this is anecdotal rather than written down, that to get a license, you will require planning permission. Well, that is fundamentally not part of this legislation. They're two completely different pieces of legislation. You've got planning control areas and you've got licensing. Licensing deals with the safety of an activity. Planning deals with the use of a property. They're two completely different things. But if one council is already conflating those two issues and requiring planning permission by default as a requirement for licensing, we have a problem. So we have raised this with the Scottish Government. We are working with Visit Scotland and the Scottish Tourism Alliance to really now raise this to the highest agenda. And don't forget, local council elections happen on the 5th of May. Now, call me cynical, but I do wonder why it's taken so long before the local authorities are telling us how they're going to implement this. The cynic in me suggests that they want to keep this as far off the political agenda as possible. But this is your opportunity to ask your councillors what they think they're going to do with this implementation and how this is going to affect you, because this is, you are part, your business is part of the community and they are there to represent you as well as the residents. So don't be shy in making it a political issue, because it has become one. There's loads of really, really great questions coming in, and we're never going to be able to deal with all of them today. So we will answer the questions and publish a list of them afterwards. But there's a few. Louise, this is an interesting one. There's been quite a lot of chatter about how can you offer midterm. Some people are saying that, you know, their insurance policy is only allowing up to 28 days, etc. There's lots of different. Yeah,
in the homes where we do midterm rentals, and there are lots of people that prefer that style of letting. They are on council tax, not on business rates, and they aren't. I don't think, you know, they aren't furnished holiday lets. So so they're not. And the private residential tenancy is there for somebody's main residence, and we are only ever providing temporary accommodation or accommodation through companies. So that's how we do it, and yeah, that's how we do it.
Yeah, absolutely that. So private residential tenancy isn't necessarily shortened to 28 days. It only becomes a PRT if it's their primary residence, if it becomes their primary residence. So that's how you can have those midterm and still be within all of those thresholds. And the other thing is that there was mention about the new, you'll all have got a letter, and there seems to be a lot of chat on social media about this letter that says you're going to have to evidence occupancy of over 70 days a year. Now, that was part of the Berkeley review, and the Berkeley recommended that we would, going forward, have to evidence actual let of 70 days, as well as an intention to let for over 140, in order to stop people with second homes from being able to access a small business bonus scheme. So in a lot of cases throughout the UK, people have gone, oh, I'm letting it out as a holiday let, and then not paying any kind of business rates or council tax. So it's to shut that loophole. But if you think, you know, if you're a legitimate business and you're not getting over 70 days, then you might need to look at your marketing plan, for one. So you shouldn't be concerned about the 70 days piece. They also haven't told us how they want us to evidence that yet. And I'm talking to the assessors about what they're going to need in terms of that evidence. So we'll help you navigate through that as well. But it does feel like yet another attack on our sector, but actually we supported that proposal when the Berkeley review went through. There's so many questions. There are so many questions. And by the way, yes, if you've submitted a question on SurveyMonkey and want to send in more questions, we're keeping the SurveyMonkey questionnaire open for as long as we need to, so that we can keep this live FAQ document open and addressing all of your concerns going forwards. But if you do have additional questions and you've already filled in the SurveyMonkey, please do send them to communications@assc.co.uk and they'll be collated in with the bigger document. Quite a lot of people, and this is relative, so the Scottish Government has committed to reviewing the legislation in summer 2023. My concern with that is that, and I've told them this, is that they don't have any baseline data. Therefore, you can't really do an adequate review. So we're actually looking at potentially commissioning an independent review so that we have the baseline data from this year to see what the impact is by next year. So we're also looking at that. We're looking at everything we can to protect this sector as we navigate through this legislation. Some people are saying, and this is an interesting one for both of you, are saying that they have stopped opening up their booking calendars post 2023. What I would say is that as an existing host, you have to apply for a license by April 2023, and you have to have that license in place by April 2024. So actually you can open up your calendars until April 2024. But there is a risk, and somebody else pointed out that, you know, OTAs charge cancellation fees, you know, if you cancel. So how are you guys navigating through that? Have you thought about that yet? Are you closing your calendars, or what are you doing? Again, this comes back to terms and conditions, and we've done another talk on terms and conditions, which people might want to go back and look at. We're
normally open for a year ahead, and so obviously we're about to hit that year. I mean, you know, the craziness is that you can't really plan for more than 6 months ahead. I mean, you know, the situation that puts businesses in with you know, when I go to see, if I go to see a new owner, if I'm thinking about hiring staff, the ability to actually plan ahead is significantly impacted at the moment. And the idea that Edinburgh Edinburgh Council is saying that there's this licensing coming in from October, and that they're doing a consultation on it this summer. I mean, you know, it shows a complete and total disregard for business, that you could be thinking that that's a workable time frame, because it so clearly isn't.
Well, indeed, and we've been pointing out for years now that there is a significant booking problem, because if we did a nice pretty chart and everything to make it understandable, because people are simply not going to want to book somewhere. It's akin to you going into the supermarket and filling up your supermarket trolley with all this delicious food and getting to the checkout and them saying, actually, no, sorry, can't serve you, and you have to put it all back. People won't go into that shop. They're going to go into the next door shop that doesn't have that sort of thing going on, which is going to be a hotel in our situation. So there is a real problem with booking.
I think that one of my greatest concerns as somebody who absolutely loves Edinburgh, and who we write a blog and social media supporting local business and things to do here and all this stuff, but it's the impression, it's the message that Edinburgh will be sending the world about how you're essentially not very popular. You're not welcome here. Well, you are. Well, you can come here, but we'll dictate where you can stay, and that feels terrible. I mean, it really does feel terrible. And so it's crucial that our voices, that are welcoming voices to the world, are heard, and that people sort of understand what's at stake. I'm not sure that. I'm not sure that a whole load of business in Edinburgh understand yet what could potentially happen as a result of this anti-business planning legislation.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and it's actually quite terrifying. We estimate that about 50% of self-caterers and up to 75% of bed and breakfast have no idea this is coming down the road. And there's also some comments in the chat about people operating under the radar. Lost my train of thought there. People operating under the radar. So how are they, if you look at the guidance for local authorities, it suggests that the local authority gets in touch with existing operators by highlighting or signposting to people on non-domestic rates, bed and breakfast that have got their food hygiene certificate. These are all the businesses that are already complying with existing legislation. The difficulty is they have no idea where the other people are. So how are they going to target them? And these are the people that certainly the licensing legislation is meant to be targeting. It's meant to be giving a level playing field. But actually what's going to happen is existing operators who already comply with existing legislation will just be clobbered with huge amounts of administrative burden and cost for no reason whatsoever. And this is on top of the rising cost of doing business. This is on top of fuel costs, on top of utility bills, et cetera, et cetera. So people will go under the radar. It's going to happen. And this is why this legislation is not fit for purpose. But we just have to try and mitigate against the worst excesses of the legislation as best as we can. And we are here to help you as operators and property managers to do that. Veronique says, I've just got my certificate of lawfulness, took a lot of work with very little guidance, indeed. And that's the type of thing that we're going to try and help you with going forwards. In a rural setting, if you have no neighbours, is it possible to change the ownership of the house or cottage so that you serve notice on yourself as the owner? I'm going to have to come back to you on that one. I think that's a really interesting concept, and we'll go talk to some solicitors and see what we can do to answer that one. But I'm not going to make that one up, I'm afraid. I mean, I think we should possibly wrap up, because I know that Anna, you're off to the Edinburgh Tourism Action Group conference in Edinburgh today. Yeah. So you can go and make sure that they're supporting us and remembering that we're part of the business and tourism community, not puppy farmers, sex traffickers and drug dealers, as we have been called recently. As I say, thank you for all of your questions. We haven't got to even half of them, I'm afraid, but we will do, and we'll collate a document and we'll publish it as soon as we possibly can. This session has been recorded and will be published later on today. I'd like to thank Louise and Anna for their time and their passion and commitment, and brilliant addition to our tourism offering in Edinburgh, and all of you on the call that are vital to tourism in Scotland. And just rest assured that we are here to help as much as we can. If you're not a member of the ASSE, please consider joining the ASSE. We're here to help, and we do fight awfully hard for our sector. And I'd just like to say thank you so much and have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks, Louise. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.